blood, sweat and tears that has been used on this farm. I mean, to see that be destroyed in front of your eyes every day and you just cannot do anything about it. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. This is private property. I think all over the world, private property should be respected.
Respect for convention isn't in the blood of Venezuela's leftist president, Hugo Chavez. He sees himself as a latter-day Robin Hood in a country where less than 5% of the population owns 80% of the land. It was Venezuela's poor who voted him into the presidential palace.
If you share a house, you'll know that if something needs doing, you can just wait for someone else to do it. But when it comes to fitting a smoke alarm, you really do need to get round to it. Don't hang about. Fit a smoke alarm. Now.
The Ashes continues this Thursday on BBC Radio 4 Longwave and 5 Live Sports Extra on digital radio.
From the delights of caravanning to a wedding, Las Vegas style. Travel the world. We'll see you in the departure lounge at 2:20. Here's Alan Yentob now on BBC One, and things are looking up.
High-rise heaven or high-rise hell, this is Hong Kong. Here on this overcrowded island, space is at a premium, even after death. In the Man Mo Temple, people come to pay their respects to their ancestors and to ask for help and advice from the immortals who guard the temple. But belief in the afterlife is no relief from the laws of real estate. Even the Wall of Remembrance is high-rise. Each of these plaques is purchased on behalf of ancestors who are buried elsewhere, but they're not cheap. This is quite probably the most expensive real estate in the world. Over there is mainland China, and that is Shenzhen, a city of towers that has sprung up out of nowhere. This is now the busiest border in the world. China is the world's fastest growing economy. Looking like Oz in the distance, Shenzhen is part of a special economic zone, a gold rush town stretching 50 kilometers along the border. These graves bear witness to the fact that people have lived and died here for hundreds of years, but nobody has ever seen anything like Shenzhen.
Shenzhen is probably the most amazing urban phenomenon in the history of the world. It's a city effectively the size of London. No one knows exactly how big it is. You get crazily different estimates. That city the size of London has been built in 20 years from nothing. In just 2 years' time, 2007, we'll pass really one of the great milestones of all human history. That's the year in which, for the first time, a majority of the world's population will live in cities and a minority in the countryside. We will have become an urban world.
If architecture is the visual style or language of a city, there's no doubt that the language of Hong Kong is money. The Hong Kong skyline today has erased all trace of its past as a 19th century colonial trading post and taken on the uniform of international capitalism. Viewed from Kowloon, the newer buildings like the towering International Finance Centre seem to be taking on Victoria Peak itself in a race for the sky. Getting up in the air reveals how incredibly tightly packed the buildings are. Over the years, millions of people, many of them refugees from the mainland, have crowded into this space.
Hong Kong is a dynamic powerhouse of an economy. That's why it builds so many tall buildings. But secondly, of course, Hong Kong is a very tiny area of land. Most of Hong Kong is scattered across islands, which are volcanic, they're rocky, they have very, very little place for human settlement. So the buildings have to be squeezed up, and the only way to go on land like that, like Manhattan as well, is to go upwards.
Hong Kong is like a laboratory of the future, a huge pressure cooker of humanity from which one almost expects something new to evolve. As the towers of the central business district grow shinier, sleeker, and of course taller, you wonder where it all began. Where land is scarce, property is everyone's favourite investment. Incalculable fortunes have been made in Hong Kong real estate. It was time to talk to an insider.
So tell me something, how much of this cityscape was here, say 10, 20 years ago?
Well, 10 years ago, quite a lot of it was here. If you look this way, the first skyscraper built here was Jardine House, which is the one with the round windows, which was built in about 1973. And that really started the trend here. And then if you look across this way, the first major high-rise done over here was the Bank of China building, which was I.M. Pei's masterpiece, and a lot of people think it's the best architectural high-rise in the world.
How much of the surrounding environment here around us where we're standing, how much of this was sea or mountain?
All of it.
Pardon?
All of it was pretty much sea. And you can't quite see from where we are at the moment. If you just look over there, there's a green bank sort of in between the roadscape next to the Bank of China. That was effectively the old seawall, and above that was the British Army garrison. Everything's been a series of reclamations since the end of the last century. At the end of the day, this is a very commercialised city, and the pressures on land use here are so great compared to other developing cities. I mean, Shanghai, for instance, has got pretty much unlimited land supply. Here, there is no more land. So, unfortunately, as a result of that, you've got to knock down buildings and start again.
So what happens when there isn't any more space, there's no more mountain to take, there's probably more sea to take? I said, what do? Just take more sea, take more mountain, take what you can?
Well, you keep going up.
You keep going up?
Keep going up.
If money is the religion of Hong Kong, then the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank headquarters, known simply as the bank, is its cathedral.
When it was first constructed, This was the most expensive building in the world, and it still holds the record for Hong Kong. Although it's overshadowed by quite a lot of taller buildings, it set a standard for quality, and architecturally it put Hong Kong on the map.
Hong Kong means fragrant harbour. Initially a small fishing community, since the British took control in 1841, Hong Kong has been all about trade. Even now, it's the world's busiest container port. Its business is business. And at the heart of it all was the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank. Its first building was replaced in the 30s by this granite fortress, a symbol of stability and prosperity. When they won the commission to build a new headquarters in 1978, Norman Foster and Partners turned the concept of the bank inside out. The big idea was openness, transparency, access. Despite its high-tech look, it embraced the Chinese tradition of feng shui, deferring to local experts on the most auspicious position for the escalators which form the entrance to the building. Entering the great glass belly of the beast, you emerge into a massive atrium, a banking hall designed to handle 10,000 transactions a day. The coat hanger shapes on the exterior, which give it its unique profile, are diagonal trusses 2 stories deep. Floors are suspended. Interiors are unobstructed, bathed in natural light. For all the ingenuity of Foster's design, the bank quickly learned one of the first rules of tall buildings, but they breed competition. While the bank was still under construction, their rivals in the Bank of China next door announced that they too would build a new headquarters to replace this Art Deco relic from the 30s, and theirs was going to be even taller. There was a powerful political undercurrent too. China's national bank was expanding prior to the handover of the former colony back to the communist mainland. When the Bank of China was officially opened in 1990, it towered above its rival. It was the tallest building in Asia and a clear statement of intent. To design it, they chose the man who introduced a glass pyramid into the courtyard of the Louvre, the Chinese-American architect I.M. Pei. What he came up with looks like a 3-dimensional geometric puzzle. But behind the reflective facade is a miracle of structural engineering, making it tall, strong, and surprisingly economical. Inside, a traditional banking hall is pierced by a 15-story atrium. Impressive, but the bank wasn't simply throwing money at the project.
The big challenge for us was to work within a very limited budget. Originally, what we had to do was to try to find a structural system that would be extremely efficient. I suppose the only advantage that we really had, because we didn't have the advantage of money, but we did have the advantage of height. So we had to seize that opportunity.
But competition with HSBC wasn't the end of the story. There were rumors that the building's design produced bad feng shui, as one of its architects told me.
Even in the old day, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank and Bank of China is always a rivalry in terms of the banking business. And when Mr. Pei designed this building, the whole consideration is how to manipulate the space in order to have a taller building. By doing so, inevitably, you're creating triangular space and sharp angles pointing to different building or locations. Now, according to the feng shui expert in China, all this sharp angle normally is bad for you. If you are facing by something sharp, you will not feel comfortable.
So it was good for the building because the sharp angles weren't pointing at the people inside the building. I mean,
Yes, you might
that's
say
a bit selfish.
No, but the design was not intentional to do that, right? And it's just coincidence. When we building this building, one of the sharp angle was pointing to the Legislative Council building.
Looking out of the window, I could see clearly one of the bank's distinctive blade-like angles pointing directly at Hong Kong's equivalent to the Houses of Parliament. What's more, the timing couldn't have been worse, as this was the lead-up to the Chinese handover. And another feng shui casualty turned out to be the Hong Kong governor's house. Sherman told me they'd planted a willow tree to ward off the bad energy. This combination of hard-headed materialism and superstition intrigued me. I wanted to find out more. Feng Shui literally means wind and water, man in harmony with the subtle forces of nature and landscape. The fact that corporations and government bodies take it so seriously suggested to me that behind its futuristic facade, Hong Kong is still rooted in ancient traditions.
Tell me, what is this? It's like a compass.
Yes, this is an important feng shui instrument. Actually, it's a compass we use to measure the direction of buildings. So you see there is a lot of complicated formulas here. It's actually helping us to calculate what kind of energy is coming to affect a building from different angle.
And how much is feng shui part of Chinese life?
I think it's quite an essential portion of our life is affected by metaphysics. Actually, unconsciously, the Chinese has got this deep-rooted in their mind. So every day in their daily life, like they select auspicious days to open the shop, or they even select auspicious day to get married. So all these things are related to feng shui.
Behind us is the Bank of China over there. Yeah. How is that for feng shui?
It is located in a very good position. It's the same area. This spot is the most auspicious spot we call the Dragon's Den. So that means the energy of the Victoria Mountain concentrate in that area. But the shape of the building creates a lot of sharp angle.
A lot of sharp angles.
Yeah, and in feng shui, sharp angle is aggressive. Yeah. It attacks. So therefore, if you have a building which is facing exactly that sharp angle, you will have problems.
Is there any problems living in high buildings, or is that good?
Actually, in feng shui, we always emphasizing on shelter against the wind. So like the Chinese terminology is, you need to have a dragon on the left, a tiger on the right, and a phoenix in front, and a tortoise behind you. So these are the 4 protections. So if you live in the top floor of a building, definitely you look down, everything is lower than you do not have a shelter. So when you have low shelter, the energy cannot concentrate.
What about over here? What I notice here is that the buildings have got quite a lot of shelter. In other words, there's quite a lot of variation. And the mountain is behind them, protecting them. So is that good?
So in that case, you have very strong mountain aspects. That means, yes, human harmony is okay. But the money aspect becomes weak.
So money is not good there. That's because they paid a fortune for those
because you cannot see the sea like before. The sea is water. Water is money. So if you have big building blocking your energy, it means your money energy will reduce.
You ought to be giving financial advice to people.
The Star Ferry crosses Victoria Harbour, connecting mainland Kowloon with Hong Kong Island. The closer you are to the sea, and the further you are from the earth, the more your building is worth. This Bay Area contains some of the most valuable real estate in an intensely speculative market, where buildings aren't architecture so much as currency.
The speed of change here and the pace at which the market moves is almost impossible to believe. For instance, there are 6 buildings over there behind me which have only just gone up. They're brand new and they're about to be pulled down because there's more money to be made for the owners and more luxurious apartment blocks are going to go up in their place.
Space is at a premium whether you're rich or poor, and Hong Kong knows all about rich. They say there are 45,000 millionaires living here, and most of them are in towers. From the outside, the high-rises under construction over there look much the same as many others across the island. But that isn't the point. You're here for the dream. The first thing you have to realize about Bel Air on the Peak is that it's not actually on the peak. We're entering the looking-glass world of the property developer, Hong Kong style.
Welcome. This is only a temporary show suite that we have established because on the present grounds we will be erecting the final phase of the residential Bel Air development.
What will you do with this when that happens?
Well, condominiums, apartments, flats, and this is only to show people what the future clubhouse will look like.
Will people be able to get furniture like this in the rooms?
Not in the rooms, but in the lift lobbies.
And what are these?
This is a pair of console from the Chateau in France. We acquired from actually a family from the south of France, the Rothschild family.
The Rothschild?
That's right.
They must be worth a lot of money.
It is very reasonably priced, let's call it that way, and it's a lovely piece.
And that's the terrace out there, I see.
Correct, correct. Bel Air is not only a residential development, it is a lifestyle concept. What we like to do is to offer our residents the whole range of unique services, from limousines, yachts, gourmet dining. For example, when they buy a flat, they are given a certain amount of points with which they can exchange for services.
These girls all lined up to sell, are they?
Yes, they're expecting appointments with the customers, yes.
I see lots of cars around here, rather desirable sports cars and things. Are those going to be available to clients like me if I wanted one?
Very much so. That is actually part of our Dream Car Club. All the fun cars that men are crazy about, we just make available to them through the bonus points. So this weekend, you could be driving a Ferrari. Next weekend, a Lamborghini. And you can do that through the lifestyle bonus point system.
Good, sounding good. It says here, Antonio Canova. Can't be, it's a copy of a Canova.
Of course, obviously. Yeah.
Just testing.
Yeah. Now we're walking into a 4-bedroom apartment, 2,500 square feet.
Yeah. That's nice.
These are Fabergé plates that I got from St. Petersburg, Russia. I handpicked each and every one.
Wow.
This is a study. And then portraits of some of the most distinguished ladies in the world. And this is the master bedroom.
Oh,
with a view like that.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, can't complain.
Can't complain. I mean, the view sells itself.
It does. Okay, so what's it going to cost me?
This one? 3-4 million US.
Are you open to offers or bargains or?
For you, today, I have to show you the bathroom. Shower, full view, jacuzzi, and what's more, this is heated.
Heated floors.
Wintertime.
Gets a bit nippy.
This is perfect. This is how a home should be.
How many have you sold?
Close to 1,005 in the 15 months.
1,500 apartments?
That's right, 1.7 billion US dollars of sales.
Gosh.
At Bel Air, we have got 4 pools, 2 indoor, 2 outdoor, and then the 6 specialty spas. We've got aroma spas, everything. Our idea is to create a destination point for people. In other words, I don't want people to leave the complex. They spend the money, they should spend their free time here.
So this is really a gated community. This is
very much so, of a grand scale. Normally in America, if you say gated community, you're talking about maximum 50, 100 houses max. But here we're talking about 3,000 apartments. But because of the economy of scale, we're able to bring in a lot of super deluxe services at very minimal cost because we spread among the 3,000 units. Here is our fragrance bag. We have devised and developed our own fragrance. Bel Air number 8 is intended to create a scent to represent the sea and the ocean and the mountain, which is the true spirit of Bel Air, because as you see, we have got mountains at the back and panoramic sea view in front.
What do I do with this thing?
Put it under your pillow.
I will.
Of course, not everyone can afford the fragrances of Bel Air. At the other end of the social scale, Hong Kong has always been desperately crowded. You can see this in some of the older parts of Kowloon. 3 or 4 floors of often overcrowded accommodation were crammed above shops and places of work. Work was the only way out of poverty. Over half of Hong Kong's population still lives in public housing. These modern estates work at densities unthinkable anywhere else in the world. Each of these blocks is 40 stories high, which means a density of up to 6,000 people per hectare. Paris, by contrast, has about 250. And yet it works. The crime and vandalism rates are at nothing like the levels in the UK. The question is why, and what, if anything, can we learn? The answer is partly cultural. The estate forms a large complex, like a traditional Chinese walled village. The Chinese way of life thrives on close community interaction. Living in harmony is the ideal, in principle, if not in practice. One of the reasons public housing works in Hong Kong is that the alternatives have always been worse.
If you read how the Chinese lived in Hong Kong, in the Chinese quarters, in the 1920s and 1930s, it's absolutely horrific. They were sleeping in sort of bunks stacked up on top of each other, you know, absolute minimum living space, rather like these slave ships of old. And so to them, these fairly modest apartments are the ultimate in affluence.
A modern apartment like this is home to a family of 4. I was beginning to understand that the key to living in towers is as much about what goes on in the head, our attitude to the space, as much as the space itself. An apartment on the 38th floor can still be guarded by good luck charms and papered with images of protective deities. The Hong Kong Housing Authority is committed to making high-rise work, so it commissions engineers like Arups to study how housing blocks can be tuned to perform better. Everything from the amount of light reaching the interiors to the rate of airflow and the dispersal of cooking smells is analysed and quantified. A 40-storey building has a lot of shared air and a lot of shared waste pipes. It's when we remember the SARS epidemic and its terrifyingly rapid spread that we realise the potential risks of living high.
The people of Hong Kong have put on flimsy masks to protect themselves against a new silent threat, the SARS virus. At this housing estate, Amoy Gardens, hundreds have been infected. One of the blocks has been evacuated and is entirely sealed off. Officials are stumped as to how SARS spread so quickly. Hong Kong, one of Asia's most prosperous, most sophisticated cities, is now reeling from the impact of this new virus, a virus of unknown origin. But this isn't just a Hong Kong or even an Asian health emergency. This emergency is going global.
One unexpected consequence of the lack of space on the island is seen only on Sundays, when something truly extraordinary happens. The vast displaced population of Filipino domestic workers on their one day off take refuge in the space below Norman Foster's Hong Kong Bank. Turned out of the homes of their employers, they literally have nowhere else to go. You'd think they might be resentful or miserable, but it seemed to me like the jolliest, liveliest scene in Hong Kong. This Sunday ritual of meeting and picnicking extends everywhere there's shelter, along the walkways and pedestrian bridges of downtown. The streets seem positively hostile towards pedestrians at ground level, but what is evolving here is a new kind of open space, the kind you dream about or read about in science fiction. The world's longest escalator runs down in the morning and up in the evening. Hong Kong isn't quite the vertical city of the future, but it sometimes seems halfway there. The tram to the top of the peak is like the spine of the old colony. Once the seat at the front was reserved for the governor as he travelled to his summer residence. Now it's a journey through the high-rise landscape of Blade Runner to the island's most popular tourist destination. This has become a place to watch the skyscrapers, putting on a light show below. The commercial buildings are as ruthlessly efficient as ever in terms of rent generation, but their skins are now wired for display by night. The centre, also mischievously known as the Viagra building, has horizontal light bars built into the curtain wall. This is an architecture that never stops saying, "Look at me." I went to meet the architect responsible for two of the more exhibitionist buildings, Dennis Lau.
Of course, when we first designed the building, the client had some requests. He said, how can we make the building looks good in the night, and in the daytime, as well as the nighttime? So that we just said, architecture need not to go to sleep at night.
Central Plaza, with its built-in light clock, is one of the first in the world to have integrated lighting.
At first, we think we have something in the Central Plaza, and to be very successful, become talk all the time. So we apply this theory in the second building in the center.
So why would they care what it looks like at night?
Well, they do because they want to attract people and tenants. Tenants like to have a building that is very famous. Either it's a landmark building, maybe in the form or even the lighting. They like these ideas. In fact, the wire has been incorporated in the curtain wall system. It is a very complicated issue. In fact, we cost something like $12 million to put a lighting system there. They cost a couple of $1,000s every evening.
A couple of $1,000s in your building every evening?
The center, yes.
I'm sure it's worth it.
It's worth it because the advertising value is much more than the money they spend. Everybody knows the building because of the lighting.
look up.
Loud echoes of light.
Lighting the way ahead.
The future is Hong Kong.
The Huangpu River has always been the lifeblood of Shanghai, but since the early 90s, when Deng Xiaoping described the city as the dragon's mouth, meaning the gateway to the new China, an extraordinary transformation has taken place around it. Shanghai has been flooded with foreign investment. It's become the largest city in China and the world's biggest building site. On the west bank of the river, known as the Bund, life goes on as normal. But it's the tall buildings on the other bank, the skyline of Pudong, which announces that Shanghai has arrived in the modern world.
When you wake up in Shanghai in the morning, the first thing you hear isn't the sound of traffic, but the noise of construction. And today I just heard that the government has agreed to permit 24-hour-a-day construction in the city, which doesn't bode well for the old Shanghai, or what's left of it.
Many of these traditional Shanghai houses were actually built by foreign developers. The result is dense, low-rise, not quite Western and not quite traditional Chinese. This communal housing, based around courtyards and alleys, has formed the fabric of urban Shanghai for over 100 years. But now all that is under threat.
Shanghai is the great city of today. So slow to follow the rest of the world in the advance of modern times, eventually even China was caught up in the march of progress.
Of course, Shanghai has been a skyscraper city once before, back in the 20s and 30s, when foreign governments each had jurisdiction over different parts of the city, or concessions as they were known.
With this came wealth, and with wealth, prosperity for Shanghai, Queen City of the Far East.
For 40 years of communist rule, the city was in the architectural dark ages, until it became a skyscraper showcase once again. Pudong was the site of the wildest and most ambitious construction boom of the 90s. An area which had previously been marshland and pig farms has been transformed into a city the size of Chicago.
What's happening in Shanghai is, to my mind, the craziest and most exhilarating thing that I've ever seen in 50 years of seriously studying cities. And I think everyone has this image. It's as if you get a movie of a city and you speed it up about 100 times, so that what would happen here in London over 100 years is telescoped into, God, that's 1 year, 5 years. Everything is changing almost before your eyes.
The architect, Richard Rogers, was originally asked to draw up a master plan for the development of Pudong, but Shanghai was growing so fast it was out of date before he could finish it.
The problem with it was that by the time we'd finished the drawing, they'd already built most of it, and nothing to do with what we'd drawn. It was such energy. It was quite amazing. Now, 9 years later, I came back. Now, when I was there 9 years before, the city was 9 million. It's now about 19 million. It actually had added 1 million people every year. It added New York in the 9 years we were away or London, to the existing city. Shanghai makes Hong Kong look like a village.
And what was the first thing they did? They built a landmark tower. And not just any tower. The unique and vaguely futuristic Pearl Orient Tower. It's a broadcasting tower, a sightseeing gallery, a revolving restaurant, and a bar. Shanghai itself is known as the Pearl of the Orient, and the tower is an equivalent to the Eiffel Tower in Paris for the local people and for the tourists who flock here. The message is, Shanghai has arrived.
To us, this tower may look like something out of Star Trek, but I'm told that the architect had something quite else in mind. He based it on a Tang Dynasty poem about the haunting sound of a lute.
The poem is in a melancholy mood about a beautiful woman musician bemoaning her marriage to a mere merchant. Still, the sound is the thing. The fine strings hummed like lovers' whispers, chattering and pattering, pattering and chattering, as pearls large and small on a jade plate fall. Just how many of Shanghai's tourists are familiar with the poem, I found impossible to tell, but I did pick up on a great affection for a building which to us can seem slightly kitsch. So what should a Shanghai tower look like? The permutations are endless, and this one even has a hole in the top.
In Chinese mythology, the circle represents the heaven, the square represents the earth, and as this aspires to be the tallest building in China, it'll connect the earth and the heavens. And so it seemed appropriate to have this large circular aperture as a representative of the heavens over Shanghai. It served an additional function of, because of the size is about 50 meters, it radically reduces the overturning moment as a result of wind. The wind forces in Shanghai being extremely severe. Now, when we presented this to the government officials in China and when the building was released, there were some people because of the sponsor of this project being Japanese, who associated the circle with the Japanese flag. But I think a compromise was reached by the introduction of this bridge, which crosses through this form and has quietened down the controversy considerably. And the then mayor of Shanghai then authorized this project to proceed.
This 21st century Shanghai is for now being designed by Western firms of architects. The tallest building in Pudong is currently the Jinmao Tower, designed by the Chicago office of Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. It too seems to be playing its part in the debate about what a Chinese skyscraper should actually look like, though in this case its inspiration is clear. The one form of indigenous tall building common throughout the Far East is the pagoda. It's a sacred tower reaching up to the sky where the gods dwell. The Lunghua Temple Pagoda dates from the 10th century AD. It has a brick core with wooden roofs and balconies. Like many pagodas, it has 7 stories, one each for the 7 treasures of the world. The very top is known as the treasure bottle. Buddhism is a religion of the image, preached through images. In this strange conjunction of old and new, it's clear that the image of Shanghai is still developing. The Jinmao is designed to be a landmark, a deliberate fusion of skyscraper and pagoda profiles. The building is set back in multiples of the lucky number 8. It's clad in a metal latticework that gives it a richer texture and a softer outline. And the pinnacle is a machine-age lotus blossom. Is this a successful attempt to merge a global form with a local style, or is it a car crash between the nostalgic and the futuristic? I dare say time will tell. I read somewhere that China is the new playground of the world's civic dreamers, and this gigantic model of a city seems to prove it. I was told that after 10 years of breathless change, Shanghai was now an international metropolis. It had grown up and grown tall. In a way, it had caught up with the rest of the world and was now trying to take stock of itself. When a group of schoolchildren crowded into the room and lined up around the model, it was impossible not to feel that the future really had arrived. It was a moment so perfect, I wondered for a second whether it had been staged for our benefit. Then came the sound of Elgar, and the light show was about to begin. Shanghai is certainly not afraid to announce its plans to the world, and there's an enthusiasm and conviction about the future here that's unlike anything I've ever encountered in the West. Despite my ambivalence about the Jinmao, I must admit I was pretty impressed by the sight of the tower at night. I couldn't resist a look inside. I got to see the best view in the house from the chairman's suite. Across the river from Pudong, the old buildings of the Bund were beginning to remind me of Liverpool. It had been a long day. Unlike Hong Kong, Shanghai does have plenty of old buildings which are worth fighting for. Areas like the French Concession are leafy ghettos with large houses dating from the 1920s. But even these are not safe from the bulldozer.
The pace of change, I think, is a bit of a concern. I think largely because Shanghai has a lot of very beautiful old architecture that is imperiled by this rush to modernize the city.
Li Chungpei's concern became personal when in 2001 the story broke that his father, the world-famous architect I.M. Pei, had written to the Chinese authorities asking if they could save a family house from demolition.
My family does have ties to Shanghai. My father attended school in Shanghai, for example, and my grandfather was very active with the Bank of China, and many family members, aunts and uncles, lived in and around the area.
The Pei House was on Wang Pi Road. It was built in 1911, but its association with a difficult colonial past didn't do it any favors. People are worried about the inflexibility of a master plan that ultimately brought about the destruction of the building and all of its memories. This had been old-style planning, brutal clearance of the kind we saw in Britain in the 1960s. And I wondered if the same mistakes weren't being made all over again.
Hello.
Their growth is fantastic. Of course, there are dangers of burnout. 10 years ago, I saw the mayor and I said, God, it's wonderful. You have 9 million people, 7 million bicycles. And he took it completely wrongly. He said, don't worry, Mr. Rogers, we're going to ban bicycles by the end of the century. Now, they haven't banned bicycles, but they have banned bicycles in certain areas because they're seen as an anti-technology, anti-modern. Of course, bicycles is one of the most efficient ways, in fact, is probably the most efficient way to move in the world. But of course, it has that image, the wrong image.
And this is exactly the right image. Tall buildings are all about image. They're the universal backdrop of status and power. Nothing says we've made it quite like a skyline of office blocks. So by that measure, Shanghai has achieved a great deal already.
Well, there really was no incentive to come to Shanghai. There was no concentration of office space. So creating this environment where international commerce could take place was the goal. And that is what really was instantly achieved, almost instant buildings. It doesn't have to be this Blade Runner type of environment, very stark and very alien in a way. I find when I'm in Pudong that you are sort of fleeing from one building to the next. It's just the environment is so inhospitable that you really want to get out of Pudong as soon as you can. You want to do your business and get out.
It's not too late for Shanghai. Any great city growing at this pace is bound to make mistakes. It's a work in progress. But as I left the city of the future behind, I was for a moment taken aback, overwhelmed by the sights and sounds of the streets of old Shanghai. Once upon a time, not so very long ago, there was a desert kingdom. And the man who ruled this kingdom of sand was a mighty prince. One day, the prince said, I'm going to build a tower, and the tower will be the tallest in the world. Well, something like that anyway. One of the strangest things about Dubai is that its most famous building doesn't exist. The Burj Dubai Tower is destined to be the tallest in the world. It is under construction, but then so apparently is everything else. This whole place is a building site.